Welcome back to another episode of the Deals for Dentists podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Block. And through these podcast episodes, I'll be interviewing dental professionals and companies and aim to inspire, entertain, and educate you on the best tools and technologies out there. My goal is to help make your practice and career more profitable, efficient, and most importantly, more enjoyable. And check out my latest book, Stress-Free Dental Implants, and my first book, The Stress-Free Dentist, which you can find on Amazon or on my website, thestressfreedentist.com. And today we're joined by Chelsea Myers. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Eric. It's good to be here.
Chelsea, where are you zooming in from today?
I am in Tulsa, and it's actually incredibly rainy, thunderstorm. So if you hear any loud booms, not to be alerted. It's just our beautiful weather happening here.
That's it. I just finished House of Dragons, which is the Game of Thrones spinoff. So that'll be that. If it starts raining or thunderstorming, I'll be right back into the episode. So that's cool.
Very good.
So Chelsea, tell me all about yourself. You're a life coach. Tell us all about, how you became a dental life coach.
Yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting story. So growing up, my parents worked really hard to provide for us, and they put it into our heads, we needed to do something that would have a really secure career path. And so the things I remember being suggested to me multiple times were go into the legal profession, go into accounting, go into medicine, something of that nature, something where I'd have a really solid path. And numbers always came easy to me. So I was headed down the financial route, and came home from school one day when I was 16 years old. And I was surprised because normally I came home, my parents were at work. I came home and my mom was there and my uncle was there. And I was really excited until I realized why they were there, which was to let me know that my dad had passed away that day. He'd been in a fatal car accident. And when you're 16 years old, you don't have any context to deal with. You're not ever expecting to deal with the loss of your parents as a kid, and you don't have any blueprint for how to handle these things. So I found myself diving into self-help books, and my mom was wise enough to get us, grief counseling and get some support someplace that way. But the self-help material really stood out to me. I was just fascinated by it. And there's this book called As a Man Thinketh, and I would read something in that book and then apply the teachings or kind of play around with them and see how that might be true in my life. And it was amazing that, the more ownership I took over my own thoughts and the things that I was doing in my life, the more things started to happen the way that I wanted them to. So I just really latched onto this material. But, also in an effort to deal with that period of life, one of the things I found myself doing was like really throwing myself into things. And so at that point it was school. So then I really threw myself into school. And then when it was work, I'd really throw myself into work. And I think we all do that. When you're faced with a lot of stress, you try and figure out what pieces do I know how to do? What can I control? And you do that. But it wasn't really until, going through the grief process and really understanding my mind, understanding what was happening emotionally, that I was able to implement some healthy habits and figure out how to deal with high stress situations, dramatic change, and continue to create the results that I wanted in my life. So fast forward a little bit, I graduated with business finance and took a job at Wells Fargo Bank, where I found myself implementing some projects requiring what I learned was called professional coaching. I was working with some really talented individuals, really established group doing things the same way for a long time. And the changes that we were implementing were not necessarily popular. And they required a lot from these people who were doing really good work a certain way. And so not only delivering the change, but in an effort to keep the team cohesive and moving on the same path together and being happy about it, that required a lot of me. And so I found myself going back to those books and going back to those studies that had helped me so much, and dripping them into the content and delivery of what I was doing at Wells Fargo. And so one of the managers that we shared the floor with, he was like, "Hey, what are you doing over there? Because the changes are happening. We all kind of expected this to blow up in your face. It's not. And I want to know, what are you learning? I want to know this for my team." And so I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I started teaching him what I was teaching them. And he's like, "You've got to work with this dentist buddy of mine. He's been talking about something similar in his practice." And so he introduced me to him. And that was a fantastic professional marriage of sorts, because I got to help him and his team get the transformation that they were looking for. And at the same time was introduced to this fantastic industry of people that I've not been able to leave since. So that's kind of the long story short. I ended up partnering in a handful of practices and got to see firsthand the amazing talent and intellect that exists, as well as the way that the development and the skill sets that I'm providing are able to be implemented, and how that can actually change environments. So it's been really cool.
And now, are you a certified life coach? And can you explain exactly what a life coach is?
Yeah, sure. So I am certified, and I've participated in a number of different trainings and courses, seminars, workshops, all the things. I continue to study this stuff on a daily basis, but really, I'm concerned with optimal efficiency and real world function. So I'm really taking the best teachings, the things that I've learned from all of the different places that I've learned them, whether that be a coach certification, training program, or my own college, or my own experience owning practices. And I've packaged it in a way that I feel is most beneficial to the people that I work with, who are dentists and dental executives.
And life coaching is, can you explain how it differs from your traditional therapy or psychotherapy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't diagnose anybody. I don't prescribe medications. Really, what I do is I work with individuals to figure out what it is that they want, where it is that they're at, and how to close that gap. And that's different for everyone. But our environments are fast paced and they're multifaceted, and our brains are constantly observing and concluding and suggesting action based on our perceptions and our programming. So, what we want to do to increase our flexibility and adaptability is to understand how we're thinking and decide if that's the way that we want to keep thinking. Is that suitable? Is that serving us? Is it aligned with our ultimate goals? If the answer is yes, fantastic. A lot of times, even for me, I find that the answer sometimes is no. And so we want to figure out why and how to reprogram or change those responses.
So after your colleague connected you with the Wells Fargo colleague with the dentist buddy, you started coaching that dentist. Have you been with dentists and hygienists ever since?
Yeah, so I've been in this industry for about a decade now, and it's been just really, really rewarding. But yes, it started with him. Then he's, introduced me to a couple of friends of his study club, and it just kind of went from there. At that time, I was still keeping my 9 to 5 job. I was at Wells Fargo, and then I transferred to a public education, doing a very similar role, but within the North Texas region. But this thing just kept. This is what was, the fire in my life. This is what I was at that time. It was a lot of telephone and email coaching, and then some in-person things as well. It's transitioned, thank you to Zoom. But yeah, this is just the thing that I found keeping me up at night, getting me up in the morning, and not in a bad way, in a really passionate, excited way. And so this is where I put all of my time and energy now.
So you found your calling and what you're passionate about, but did you find there was such a need in the dental industry for this?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. It is so well received. And I was actually really worried about that, which is why it took me a while to transition to the entrepreneurial role, because I didn't know what the need would be. I didn't know how to create that steady flow of clients and income. But yeah, absolutely. I have found that we work in an industry of just absolutely amazing people who enjoy learning, they enjoy developing, and want access to things to make them better leaders, to make them more productive, whether that's associates or owners. They want to be their best. I mean, it's dentistry.
And do you find that the ones you're helping, Is this typically later on in their career? Are you finding that even young dental professionals are coming to you, or is it all ages and all stages of careers?
Historically for me, and I'd love your input on this, but historically for me, it was people that were more established. And what that looked like was, okay, I've done all the things I mapped out to do, and I'm still not feeling fulfilled. Or as my, as my take home is increasing and all of my debts are paid off, for some reason, my overwhelm and stress is also increasing, which is counterintuitive. You'd think that as you have more money and less debt, that maybe your emotional life would become more peaceful. But for some people, that's just not the case. What do you see though?
I agree. Although I think it's changing. I think there's more awareness, less stigma about getting help, for your mental
Mm-hmm.
health. So I think that is changing. But I agree. Young dental professionals, they come out and they're just so hopeful, and then after a few years or some bad experiences, or they've been in the grind of the profession, then it's not what they expected sometimes. And yeah, they're stuck, they're stressed, whether it's professionally or financially. So yeah, I think that maybe it takes a few years, 5 to 10 years, to figure out that you're stuck. But I think and I hope that it continues to change, where people are reaching out for help earlier and earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally with you. We started working with a new client this year. They've got about 50 practices, a lot of young doctors, and I've been really impressed with the emphasis that they're putting on the people component of growing that DSO, because these younger doctors are getting access to this type of support as they're stepping into those leadership roles. And what's really unique about it is hearing them verbalize, I knew that I was going to be the same age or younger than my hygienist and my assistants, but I didn't actually know what that would feel like. And I didn't know what those interactions would be like. And so when they have a professional coach to bounce ideas off of, to understand what's going on in their own minds, and then to create a plan of leadership delivery and progress that they want to make in their career, it's really impactful.
Do you find that a lot of it is just helping them with confidence, overcoming self-inflicted self-doubt or imposter syndrome? Do you feel like that is a lot of it?
Totally. There is so much. And I don't think that that's unique to dentistry. I think that's a people thing. I think for sure that's a high performer thing. But, um, the funny thing about confidence is confidence doesn't come from, at least true confidence doesn't come from knowing that you can do something, because the things that we want confidence doing a lot of times are things we haven't done or haven't done well, right? But we want to feel good going into it. And so one of the things that we teach at Dental Life Coach is that true confidence comes from knowing that you're going to be okay no matter what happens, whether you succeed, whether you fail. And by the way, let's get clear on what our definitions are of success and failure. But the true confidence knows from the fact that you actually know you're going to be okay, which a lot of us struggle with. In fact, we freak ourselves out that if it doesn't go a certain way, that the whole world's going to end. And that's what's really scary, is the unknown. Or in some ways, I think it's like what we're going to do to ourselves if it doesn't go well. We're going to think that we're inadequate, or we should just stop, or we should switch careers. I hear all of these things.
And I think it's a lot of times we end up putting so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect, to be everything to everyone, but to, like you said, to understand that it's going to be okay if you get a bad review, if you have a a bad experience with a patient or staff member. It's going to be okay, and you learn from these experiences, and to not put too much pressure on yourself to try to be perfect. And I feel like self-doubt is the sunburn, confidence is the aloe vera or the suntan lotion. Boom. But it's true, as you build more confidence in yourself, you overcome that self-doubt, and you can recover from poor situations, or a conflict or a bad review, and just keep on learning and moving on. Do you find that when a dentist or a dental professional they're all of a sudden owner of a practice, they're all of a sudden put in this leadership position, absolutely no training in that at all, and they're trying to be a leader to their team, do they end up putting too much pressure on themselves there? And do you help them through that leadership role?
Yeah, we do. So, you brought up bad review or things going wrong at the office. And really, I think that with a slight pivot, we get in this perspective that once we have our degree or once we own our practice, that that's it. Now we should know everything that we should know in order to make the success. And actually, if we just pivot just a little bit, and maybe that, $400 write-off or that bad review, if we take these as intermittent trainings or developmental opportunities, but assume that we're going to have those all year long for the next, 30 years of our life, it takes a little bit of the sting away. And so, yeah, but we do support in those areas. And I think one of the most important things is becoming people that other people want to be led by. Because let's face it, I mean, it's fantastic if you can find a high qualified team that wants to stay with you for a while, because in this day and age there's so many things they could be doing with their time to make the same amount of money. And so to have people who've decided they actually want to come into the office and they actually want to do dentistry and they actually want to be on your team, that's really, really valuable. And the only way we're going to achieve that is if we're the type of people that they want to be around. And that's, it's different for each person what they're looking for, but it definitely does start with the leader.
Yeah, especially like you mentioned in this day and age, post-COVID world, it's just harder and harder to keep staff. So like you said, I think you really got to appreciate the staff that you have and empower them and keep them, keep them happy. Try to understand them. And you mentioned healthy habits. Can you explain what healthy habits, you mentioned in a high stress situation, what exactly is healthy habits?
Well, earlier on, you actually mentioned self-awareness, and I would say that is one of the most healthy habits, is to really take your own temperature and understand, how am I thinking? How am I feeling? And sometimes we have to do this pretty quickly, but decide, is now the best time for me to handle something? And if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, pause. Sometimes you have to handle the thing in that moment. So then it's, okay, how am I thinking? How am I feeling? And what is the best approach for me in this situation? But self-awareness is a huge healthy habit that I'm a big proponent of. Another is being consistent. And so whatever is important, making sure that we're doing those things, because otherwise we become a victim to everything around us unintentionally. We think the world is happening to us, our career is happening to us, and it's our career's fault that we don't feel the way we want to feel. It's really backwards. But when we become the thermostat, and we're really consistent with our morning routines, and we're really consistent with the way that we approach and guide our teams, and we're really consistent with our wind down routines at night, those levels of commitment have a way of bleeding through into everything that we do. And in our experience, people are much more inspired by and trusting of leaders who have a good sense of personal commitment than they are to people who just tell them the right answers.
I really like the word consistent, because if you're consistent to your team, if you're up and down and they never know what they're going to get that day, then that's not good for culture. And self-awareness, you mentioned, I think that is extremely important in decision making, because a lot of times we don't know the answer. I don't know the answer.
Right.
I need to pause on this and collect the information and hopefully figure out an answer or find people that can help me with the answer. But self-awareness that you don't have to know everything, and that's okay. But let your ego and pride, put it aside, and realize that it's okay to not know everything. Chelsea, what do you think the current state of dentistry is? Do you think that I think dentists and hygienists are under more stress than ever with this lack of staff. Sometimes I think that, people are putting more pressure on themselves. Are you finding that as well?
Yeah. So, we had, of course, the pandemic, and then we had the post-pandemic, and then we had, the, let's see, the quiet quitting, and then the silent firing, all of these hashtags, but real world things that are happening. And yeah, I do. I think that there's a lot of stress. And I think that, it has to be healthily balanced, because on the one hand, we want to keep, valuable team members in place. We want people to want to be in our workplace. And at the same time, we can't operate from fear or not make decisions out of fear that they may not, want to stay, or they may not come back from their break. So it's really, I think one of the most important things is getting really clear on what it is you're trying to build, and then operating from that high level of integrity and consistency aligned with that vision. Because what we find is the clearer the leader gets on his or her own vision and values, you start making hiring decisions and firing decisions and training decisions and business decisions, all based on those same components. And the people who are a good fit are able to be more drawn to that. They see it, they feel it, they want to be there, or they don't. And that's also okay. We want to know who's not a good fit for our team, so that we can keep building the type of environment that we want to build. But ultimately, I think it's that clarity, and that really, that this is again why it's so important that the leader is very well developed and continuously engaging in self-development. I'm really excited about, I know you have something coming up next May. I'd love to hear more about that. And I'm really excited about the efforts that just as a whole in the industry, we're putting towards the importance of self and personal development as leaders.
Yeah. And I think there's more awareness than ever right now about reducing the stigma of seeking help for mental health, whether it's a therapist, a life coach, a consultant, a mentor, a peer, whatever it is. I think that in dentistry, we can't go in on this journey alone. I have a summit coming up in May in Chicago. It's called Roses and Thorns, and it's going to be all about personal development and learning from each other's mistakes and failures. And no one can show up and not be totally honest and vulnerable and pretend like their life and practice are perfect. Everyone's going to learn from your mistakes and successes, and you're going to teach other people and help them with their mistakes and failures. That's the whole purpose behind the event. And Chelsea, I wanted to finish off with two final questions. Number one, how do we get a hold of you? How do we find out more? And number two, any advice for the young dental professionals out of there, or just in general, young entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I'm going to go backwards. So we'll start with that one. And I think that for young dentists and entrepreneurs, I would say get your support system in place. So have the important individuals around you, not only in dentistry, but outside of dentistry. So choosing your friends wisely, having a good, accountant and attorney, coaches, consultants, mentors, whoever those people are. You don't have to employ all of them, but know who they are so that you can ask the relevant questions. A lot of us, me included, will answer some questions for you and point you in the right direction. You don't have to pay us to do that. We want this to be a healthy and thriving industry. Get those healthy habits in place. Those are going to be really, really important, because ultimately your own voice is going to be the loudest one that you hear. And so if you neglect what's important to you, or you start, engaging in unhealthy eating or drinking, or getting your physical health, or your physical activity starts to waver, those types of things are going to catch up with you. We need our physical body to do all of the things, right? And so that would be my advice to the young people. And then how to get in touch with me, our website, www.dentallife.coach. You can download one of our free courses. We have a very robust LMS system with lots of courses and trainings that we use to supplement our coaching, but you can sample that there. I have a podcast, Dental Brain Crops Podcast, which you've been on, Eric. Thank you. And, or you could just reach out on LinkedIn, Chelsea Myers.
Chelsea Myers, thank you so much for joining us. You left us with so many great nuggets. And I hope to be in touch with you soon.
All right. Thanks, Eric.